Blinx the Time Sweeper is one of the first games I remember playing. Like, not the first game I ever played. That might have been when I snuck over to my friend's house as a 4-year-old when they weren't even there when my family was living in Spain, and I was hopping around Kakariko Village like nobody's beeswax, even though I couldn't read any of the Spanish. Well, I couldn't read much at all, so I guess that didn't matter. But anyways, yeah, the point is, I was willing to go to some great lengths to play some games as a wee little guy. When I was back in America and I was like 7 or 8 or something, for some reason the one console we had was Xbox, and I had the weirdest assortment of games. We had like Fusion Frenzy, which was actually dope, but then we had like Conflict Desert Storm and Freestyle Metal X. I'm not sure who even bought these, but my point is, it was a console that didn't have too many obvious, no-brainer, kid-friendly games like Nintendo consoles have. But that wasn't gonna stop me from getting my hands on the only game my kid brain wanted to play. I was determined to play some Halo Combat Evolved. Yeah, blinx was not even on my radar at all back then, but anyways, I Phoenix Wrighted my way into somehow convincing my parents to rent Halo, even though it was rated M. I think I told them the only violence was with goofy aliens or something, but they quickly knew what was up once they heard elites screaming at the top of their lungs. And so we went back to get a more kid-friendly game. This is where blinx came and sucked me into its weird-as-hell world. It has this very specific aesthetic of wonky futuristicness that I love, with these surreal creatures that look like you put a Crayola 64 pack in a blender and added some Chemical X. The director of this game was actually Naoto Oshima, who's most known for their work on the Sonic games, so that's probably a big reason why the character designs are so awesome and why they absolutely nail the design for blinx as an animal mascot platformer protagonist. It's the little details about blinx that make him so full of personality, like how he actually blinks, or how the teeter animation just looks hilarious, and how blinx will flail around when being pushed by water. They even made his goggles go on when he's under there. They didn't have to do that. That's such a cute detail. Oh, but my favorite is how on the ice level, blinx will shiver because he's cold, and all I want to do is let him in and let him curl up on the heating bed. But it's not just blinx who's full of charm. All the enemies are brimming with strange and fun design choices. These are some bright, bold, and weird as hell designs, and my bright color-seeking kid brain was very into it. You know, funny enough, this aesthetic from one of the first games I really remember playing reminds me of the first manga I ever read, which is Jin King of Bandits, and it's super underrated by the way, and these covers go ballistic in case you were wondering. Maybe that little bit of similarity in aesthetic is why blinx left such an impression on me. So much so that even to this day, this is the only game I still remember actually playing from back then. Now, granted, I definitely didn't make it very far in the game at the time because it is weirdly hard sometimes, and my hands could barely fit around that massive Xbox controller to begin with. So this was a real uphill battle, but somehow I only have fond memories though. So let me tell you, when I booted this back up and saw those metal menus giving way to the best UI my brain has ever seen, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia that just wound my clock. Okay, so the aesthetic is one thing, but what else made blinx have this lasting appeal to me? What makes this game so good? Well, first of all, blinx the Time Sweeper has a tried and true classic premise that we've all heard before. A time cat with rad-as-hell goggles who has time manipulation powers goes around with a magic vacuum slurping up and spitting out just about anything. It's basically Cat Ouija's Mansion mixed with Adam Sandler's Click film. Here, I'll let this ad from back in the day explain the game for me. I think it does a great job.
Huh? What? You can't fight time, but blinx can.
Okay, but really, blinx is a really fun action 3D platformer, but what makes it stand out from the crowd is its amazing use of time manipulation abilities. And you know, I don't think I've ever seen a game that uses time powers quite as interestingly as blinx. Funny enough, the reason the developers Artoon partnered with Microsoft for the game was because Xbox was the only console to include the revolutionary technology known as a hard drive in the actual console, which is what made the whole time manipulation thing even possible to pull off. Anyways, let's get back on track. The time powers themselves are much more interesting than the fact that the Xbox has a hard drive. So let's get into how blinx uses these time powers to make a super unique and memorable game. Right, so first off, to even get these powers, you gotta go around the 3D platforming levels to collect time crystals, and if you get a combo of 3 or 4 of a specific color, you'll basically be able to do whatever you want with time. You can either pause, record, rewind, fast forward, or slow down time. It's so cool to see this in a game because the only other place you could really do that would be on like a YouTube video or something. But where would you even find one of those? Like, where would you even start looking? So yeah, that's the big mechanic here, time manipulation, and it elevates this 3D platformer into something truly special. You really feel the effect of this because the 3D platforming moves in blinx are actually pretty standard without much spice or twang or pizzazz to it really. You got a double jump and this useless like backflip thing. And while I love the animation, getting this backflip input has never been done on purpose by anyone ever because it's pretty much entirely useless and leads to accidental deaths half the time. So really you just double jump around and at a pretty cozy pace. One thing to keep in mind though is that there's no ledge grabbing, so if you miss your double jumps, you'll find yourself clawing the wall in sadness. Although this can be a bit frustrating when it happens, I love how this detail makes blinx feel more cat-like, which is something most animal mascot platformers don't really bother to do. Like take Knuckles the Echidna, he doesn't even have a tongue that's half his body long.
Oh no!
One other fun cat-like detail was that when you fall a super long distance, blinx will gracefully land on his feet because cats always land on their feet, you know? It's a super cute touch. But anyways, all of those neat little touches and unique animations don't come into play all that much, and most of the time you'll just be double jumping around like a regular old cat. So okay then, how do they up the challenge if the platforming moveset is as basic as pretty much just having a double jump? Well, the great level design does some heavy lifting, but the real star of the show is that they pulled the old neon white trick. Yeah, they had the levels be focused on not just making it to an end goal, but also defeating every enemy in the level by spitting out junk that you suck up along the way right into their weird faces. So basically, you could say, and I mean this in the best way possible, this game sucks garbage. Defeating enemies being the goal gives a heavy focus to the time trial nature of it all, which is super fitting with the time sweeper theme, and makes it fun to optimize how you route out the level around where the enemies are placed and how you plan to take them out, and not just how to get to the end as fast as possible. So yeah, this is where the hype moments come from in the gameplay. You're navigating these weird situations with enemies, trying to suck up enough ammo, but not taking too long to do so because each stage has a time limit. And then all the while you're platforming around, trying to scrounge together time crystal combos carefully so as to get 3 or 4 of a kind, otherwise you get a bad crystal combo and you might end up being left without any time powers to use as a get out of jail free card. Well, let me take that back, because actually most of the powers are a bit more complex than just being a get out of jail free card. They all have their own uses, and the different advantages they give you are really unique and lead to some super interesting opportunities for creativity on the player's end. Obviously though, the best use of any of these time powers is the fact that they actually affect the clock on blinx's vacuum. Okay, really, these time powers all bake my potato with how cool they are. Like, let's take the pause or slow abilities. Those are the most obvious in their usage, right? You basically get a free hit on frozen or slowed enemies. But what's neat about them is that you can also use them to make platforming challenges temporarily easier. Also, and now this isn't important at all, but I love how they handled water when time is paused. It just kind of parts around you like you're Moses, and also I just really love how the water looks in this game in general. Like, it's so physicsy and shiny and so of this generation. Speaking of the water though, one of the coolest things you can do to it is reverse the flow of water with the rewind power, which often leads to secrets or neat little time-saving skips. It's so cool that the rewind doesn't just rewind enemy movements. Like, it can also repair broken parts of the level or make falling objects that were hazards to be avoided before into sick-ass time-saving elevators. Oh, also, something really neat is that when you beat a boss, it spits out a bunch of gold, but it always disappears way too fast. But if you have a rewind, then you can make it reappear and do your best Meowth impression. Fast forwarding to the next time power on our list, we have Fast Forward. So, fast forward obviously helps you get through the level faster if you gotta go fast, but it can also help in taking down certain enemies easier, like the big blob dudes who usually take forever to kill. And it also lets you take one free hit and gives you some invincibility after, which is pretty neat. Oh, I guess I shouldn't forget to mention the retry time power, which is basically like the health system. The retry system is cool because it eliminates the need for checkpoints because it basically treats the game like you're playing Fallout and spamming quick saves every 3 seconds. Yeah, retries will rewind you to where the game thinks is a safe time to spawn you just a few seconds before you got hit with a bit of invincibility so you can course correct. Now, this doesn't always go perfectly, and you may end up taking a couple consecutive hits, but they thought of that, and if you take like 2 or 3 hits in a row, it'll send you substantially farther back. What's pretty cool is that this can actually help you out if you fell off a late game area back into a starting area. If you have something you can damage yourself with down there, you can actually spend a few retries to then make it back up without doing the whole level over again. But the most weird, interesting, and janky time power is definitely the record ability. Basically, when you activate it, everything you do for 10 seconds gets recorded, and then the game rewinds and a ghost of yourself does those same actions. The game introduces it to you with some basic ideas like having you stand on 2 switches at once, or jumping on a seesaw with your recorded copy of yourself to then send your real self on the other end flying. That's all pretty neat, but I think one of the coolest applications is that you can shave off seconds of your time by sending your recording out to take out enemies in a spot where you would normally have to backtrack from, but because you rewind at the end of the recording, you just end up back where you need to be with all those enemies still getting taken out. Also, if you get the last hit on a boss while using the record ability, the game ends up dropping double the gold, and that's exactly the kind of dumb jank that we need in games. You know, you're actually going to want that extra gold too, not just to buy blinx some sick new jackets, but also to upgrade yourself with new vacuums, more health, and more time magic slots. Because this game can be brutal at times, and you're going to want all the help you can get. Like, you'll probably feel kinda outclassed by some enemy situations after you get only like a couple or so hours in. And so at that point, the game really starts to make you want to use the time powers to even the playing field. This complicates the level design so well because you want to stockpile resources strategically on your run through the level, but you can't ever take too long getting everything you need because there's a time limit you have to worry about. I know some people might not click with it, but this time limit adds a real level of intensity to some stages. Like this one with a ton of swinging axes and moving platforms that really wants you to use time powers to make it easier and all that by pausing or slowing them. Well, I did that and had a ton of fun routing out how I'd save my time powers for the right time and carefully managing how I would take out the enemies up until I had like a minute or so on the clock to reach the goal. But then right at the end I fell off a ledge to basically the beginning of the level. So I had to book it and pull a yappy no stoppy all the way to the finish line, using everything I learned when I was carefully taking my time to then barely scrape by and make it to the end just in time. Obviously, if I failed to make it, this would have been frustrating, but that's what adds this brilliant layer of tension to the levels. Like, it takes long enough and is challenging enough when everything goes right, but those moments when you fuck up and then you gotta clutch up add so much to the experience. I wish more games would inject weird, experimental, kinda janky mechanics and game systems like this into 3D platformers. I think the freedom and creativity systems like the time powers in blinx can encourage pair so well with the 3D platforming genre. Like, okay, there's a lot of modern 3D platformers doing amazing things to push platforming movesets forward, like Demon Turf or Ritz games, and that stuff is incredible. It's like my favorite type of game, but I think it's interesting that blinx can be such a compelling platformer when its actual pure movement mechanics are so simple. You know, another good example of this would be that one of the most fun and mechanically interesting things about the platforming in blinx is that you can spit the junk you collected out just about anywhere to make 4 impromptu platforms that can help you find secrets or skip sections of the level, which adds a lot of depth to the time trial aspect of the game. Or it's just fun on a casual level, feeling like you outsmarted the game. It also makes for a super entertaining speedrun because when you combine stuff like this with creative use of time mechanics, you can just obliterate blinx. Lotus did a speedrun of blinx at this year's AGDQ and it was super entertaining. I'd give it a watch if you want to see this game pushed to its absolute limit. But what if you're just a casual player trying to make your way through a neat little story? Well, then what does blinx have for you? Well, it's got a whole heap of cat shit crazy for you. We open with this pretty poetic statement. Time is like a treasure. Use each gem of it wisely and your dreams will come true. Obviously, you already knew that because you're using your time to watch a yappy video. But anyways, really, this scene sets up the time cat society blinx is a part of. It goes over how these vacuum-wielding goggle cats all keep watch on the stability of time on different worlds, trying to prevent time glitches. Because as everyone already knows, time glitches turn into time crystals, and time crystals turn into time monsters. And personally, I would like to live in a world without a 30-foot tall living hippity hop that throws refrigerators at me, but you know, that's just me. So personally, I really support what the time cats are doing out there in that weird time cat factory place. But the villains here, the Tom Tom gang, definitely do not like these cats. And I mean, for obvious reasons. Just look at the vicious acts that cats have enacted upon pigs throughout history. Shocking stuff. So yeah, this gang of hogs riding hogs is going around messing up time everywhere and causing the kind of shenanigans that only a video game protagonist can put an end to. Especially because they've captured the princess of some planet, which for some reason is an even bigger motivator for blinx than the destruction of that entire planet, but okay, whatever. Yeah, it's a pretty video gamey damsel in distress type setup to start your quest. But they do half-heartedly commit to commenting on that trope by having the princess kick the main hog in the face, but then yeah, she just gets damseled anyways. So yeah, it's not too heavy of a setup, and that opening cutscene is really all the story you'll get until the ending cutscene, but that's okay by me because I'm just fine blasting through levels, taking out these wild hogs on my way to the nebulous end goal of saving someone I barely know and met on a Zoom call for 3 seconds. Just let me suck up junk and mess with time stuff and I'm all set. Especially when the levels look this good and are this varied. Like, I don't need to know the exact lore of why I'm time sweeping through the streets of Venice, Italy. I just want to be spending all my time looking at this weird and cool architecture. And of course appreciating some inexplicable floating cloud cubes.
Wow!
My favorite stages visually have to be Hourglass Caves. They really pushed the lighting effects to their limit and made something truly awesome. Okay. So I've talked a lot about what's incredible and unique about this game, and the vast majority of blinx is undeniably amazing. But there is definitely some jank and some stank that will put some people off from the game that's worth mentioning. Maybe the first thing people will probably have frustration with is that the auto-aim is a little particular. Like, sometimes it targets the wrong enemy, or it decides to not target an enemy at all. But yeah, you can get used to that and play around it. My pro tip is that jump shots are much more reliable, as they don't auto-target other junk pieces and don't awkwardly stop after only going like 3 feet like ground shots do sometimes. A similar kind of problem is that the collision of walls or gates will block your shots from hitting enemies when it looks like they shouldn't get stuck on that stuff. It sucks because it leaves you vulnerable and with one less ammo in the tank, but you can get used to this, and if you play carefully with where you choose to take your shots, you can avoid it totally. All that being said, neither of these last issues would be so bad if they weren't compounded by the camera jank of blinx. Most of it stems from the fact that when you get close to an enemy, the game is like, oh, cool, I'll help you out, and it'll aggressively try to push your camera towards them, which a lot of times is cool because it helps you shoot accurately, but when you're in claustrophobic situations, this just means that when you're trying to manually turn your camera to actually see the enemies the game is trying to help you see, it becomes way more difficult than it needs to be. Okay, so the game has some problems, but the positives outweigh the negatives by a ton here. Like, for example, when you're loading up the game, it says warping space-time, so just that alone outweighs all the jank. Honestly though, I'm the type of person who kinda enjoys mastering the jank of some games. That is, at least if these systems are consistent in their inconsistency, if you know what I mean. It's kind of fun figuring out how to work around the rough edges and feel like you beat the odds. With blinx, I think most people will have a great time with the game despite some awkwardness that takes some getting used to. That is, until a little past the halfway point when blinx hits you with a minecart themed world, followed up by an ice physics world right after, and you randomly trip if you walk too fast on the ice. Oh great, thanks, that's really helpful. Oh, and the reward you get for getting through that is a trip through a lava bomb hell world. Yeah, the difficulty in the late game gets kind of absurd, and honestly, I wouldn't blame people if they got here and just said, okay, I've had my fill, that was a good bunch of hours, and just drop blinx here. But I'm an epic gamer, and as they say, God sends their toughest gamers their hardest levels. So I powered through all the difficulty in blinx, and while I lost a lot of brain cells from bashing my head against the wall that is these levels, I think maybe because of that lack of brain cells, I now kinda love those hard levels too. Like, the absurd difficulty ramped up the tension a crazy amount and had me reaching deep into my bag of tricks trying to exploit the game's systems to their fullest. At this point, you're going to be using the record ability purely to save ammo, which was a kind of cool development for me because it opened my eyes to a new use of a time power so deep into the game. In the hard levels, unexpectedly, there's sometimes more freedom in how you want to approach things too, which is neat. For example, you'll come to a section that's like, use the record ability to move some weird, janky sliding platform that honestly I couldn't quite figure out how it was actually supposed to work. But if you're like me, you might think, oh wait, can't I just use the fast forward ability to get hit by the lava to get some invincibility frames to just skip the whole thing? Another good example of your freedom in terms of what time powers you want to use is some of the bosses. Like, every single power gives you some kind of advantage on each boss, so you can take them out your way. What's kinda neat is that the bosses are all souped up versions of regular enemies. Like, you remember those dudes who stand on balls and shoot junk at you? Well, one of them, I guess, ate the ball, and now he's huge and ready to ruin your day. What's so cool about this idea is that you kinda have a sense of the boss's abilities going into the fight, and maybe it'll give you an idea of what kind of time powers work well against them. I mean, even if you don't want to use time powers at all, you can do that too. You can really do these in a lot of ways. So yeah, approach the bosses any way you want, but the one thing I will say you 100% definitely should do is buy super bombs or spike balls for the late game ones. Being able to do 2 damage with 1 hit makes the fights so much less frustrating, especially the ice level dude who leaves you with 1 teeny platform to move around on by the end of the fight if you don't go into the fight with spike balls. Oh yeah, and there's the roly-poly from hell who will spin the whole level while making you dodge around as they home in on you at 1,000 miles per hour. Okay, those are pretty tough, but thankfully, just like the levels, the difficulty curve is consistent. But goddamn does that curve go high. Now, if you want the game to be a bit less frustrating and a tiny bit easier overall, definitely play the Platinum Hits version if you can. It's got a bunch of small quality of life changes that make it a bit less frustrating and easier overall. Like the 10-hit blob enemies taking less hits to defeat, and there's also some levels with a few less enemies total. Oh, and a small change that ends up being a huge change is that in the final boss rush to beat the game, you can keep your ammo between bosses, which helps a ton if you buy 10 spike balls going in. I was not able to do this because I was playing on the original version, but I clutched it nevertheless. No big deal, it only took me 40 goddamn tries, and I'm not mad about it at all. Nope. Now, the one saving grace that either version of blinx gives you to combat this difficulty is that you can buy a ton of upgrades to your health bar, which can go up to 9 lives, which is a cute little detail. You can also get better sweepers as you go that have their different niches they fill, like the fire sweeper that takes out the water blob dudes in one shot. But more importantly, the fire sweeper also lets you put on blinx's goggles whenever you want. You can also upgrade how many time powers you can hold, so if you're fully upgraded and you grind a bit to get a bunch of time powers, lives, and the right vacuum, everything becomes so much more manageable. But I do wish this grind didn't feel so necessary, because it's way more fun trying to piece together the time crystals you need as you go than it is to just grind out everything you'll need before you even start the level you want to beat. However, even going in fully stocked, some of these levels are still pretty damn tough. Near the end of the game, I was also buying super bombs and spike balls just to give myself a fighting chance, and so my gold really started to deplete fast once I was at this point. Like, I don't know how anyone is supposed to do this level in Forge of Hours without abusing super bombs and records. They literally spawn you inside 1,000,000 rolling bombs, and they're just like, yeah, figure it out. Now, at the very least, they probably should have just made stuff cost a bit less in the store so restocking wouldn't, like, blow your whole bank. But at least there is a neat mechanic where when you buy more than one of the same item at a store, that item type then gets a 30% bulk discount, which can be life-saving. Quite literally, because it helps you save on buying lives. The real tragedy here, though, is that because you might be spending all your money on lives and super bombs, you might not be able to afford the incredible jackets you can buy for blinx. Personally, I spent a good chunk of time grinding to get this orange jacket so me and blinx could match, and I didn't regret a single second. But good lord, paying 7,500 for the orange jacket was bad enough. The zebra jacket, which I also really wanted, was goddamn 30,000. Took me quite a bit of time to grind for the orange one, and you have to re-buy something if you ever want to wear it again, so there was no way I was gonna grind to get the zebra jacket. I'm not that obsessed with blinx, come on. Well anyways, with all this talk about fashion, we're gonna need some tunes for the runway, and this is an area where blinx really delivers. The level themes have some nasty tracks with glide synths busting out playful melodies over these thumping beats, and some of them have cool time-themed sound effects used for percussion, which is really cool. But for me, my favorites were outside the levels themselves, like the shop theme, which has this infectious playful energy, an addictive melody that never gets old, and these cute little meow sound effects in there. It's so good. These songs really suck you in and help you stay in the zone even during the absurd difficulty spikes. Speaking of spikes, for my sake and yours, please buy yourself spike balls for the late game bosses, and also please buy yourself super bombs to get through the later levels. Super bombs are so absurdly useful, and they have the most busted range to their explosion. Like in this lava hell world, you can take out these 2 enemies at once here, right? Wait, why does it seem like I took out 3? Well, the range on the super bomb was so big, it went through the ceiling and took out a time monster from way further in the level. My god, I love this game. So yeah, buy super bombs and get all the help you can. That is, unless you're trying to go sweaty gamer mode like me, who only did that out of ignorance and really regrets it. Please just grind for lives and powers and buy the cheater pumpkin eater type items at the shop. It makes the game so much more palatable, trust me. Now, once you've used those little advantages to grind your way through hell and you've beaten the game, there's still a lot of fun to be had in getting secret cat medals and trying to beat the levels as fast as possible. I feel like most people would probably only have fun doing this for the first half of the game because it just gets too damn hard after that, and the rewards that you get for the cat medals are these weird-ass funny cutscenes, which are funny and neat but aren't like super satisfying to get or anything. Like, you'd have to be some kind of weirdo to want to go back and grind out 100% on those evil ice levels. Nobody would ever do something like... Yeah, I typically never 100% games. I've never even gotten 120 stars in Mario 64, and I've beaten that game like 6 times. But for some reason, after beating blinx, I just kept wanting to play it. At first it was just kinda aimless, just beating levels a bit faster or something. There was something about the gameplay that just really struck a chord with me in a way I didn't expect. It slowly but surely became a bit of a comfort game. Then the more I played, the more I dipped my toe back into those grueling late game stages, and that just felt the cat scratch fever. I started to feel like these levels weren't so bad anymore and that I could really maybe do 100%. Well, turns out they were still so bad, but I was much better now, and so with the help of a guide, I got all the cat medals and was super pumped. Now, not that I really care, I was just doing it for the challenge, but what's the reward at the end for 100%? Possibly an even taller, weird-ass pyramid of tom-toms? Nah, this time you get a cutscene of the shopkeeper with a new vacuum? Yeah, if you 100% the game, you get the best sweeper, which can do everything all the other sweepers could, which ironically would have made getting 100% so much easier, but you already have 100%, so it's kinda not really that helpful. It's a kinda weird reward that doesn't seem to have much use by the time you get it. Well, that is, unless you want to give blinx a cool earring while you S-rank every level by beating them under absurd time requirements. But nobody would do that. You'd have to be like a YouTuber who's become obsessed with blinx or something. Mamma mia! Yeah, I just could not put this game down, and so I started trying to S-rank all the levels. Funny enough, I had randomly S-ranked some of them before without really trying to when going back to levels for cat medals, because some of the later levels are actually kind of more lenient with the time requirement, weirdly. But anyways, if you want to get the S rank on most levels, it won't happen by accident. You're gonna have to learn that level buttwards and backwards. You gotta learn all the little tiny time savers, like how you can let go of the R button before the suck animation is done to shave off half a second off nearly every trash pickup. But it's risky because if you're too early, you won't suck at all, and that would suck. Oh, and of course, you gotta stock up on time powers because you definitely are gonna need some fast forwards to speed up blinks. This was actually one of the coolest developments in the gameplay for me once I started to try and get good times. For example, on a casual run, the fast forward is pretty niche in its usage, and it weirdly messes up your aim slightly, so it makes killing the smaller enemies a bit harder, and killing the enemies is the whole point of the game, so most people probably didn't use it all that much. But dang is it fun when you're trying to use it to blast through the levels. Like, it changes up the whole way you want to plan your route, cause you gotta think about where it's best to burn a fast forward. Like, you don't want to use it right before you might need a different time power because you'll have to slowly sit there until it runs out. I could go on and on about how fun it was to plan routes through the level like that, but then as the viewer you'd probably want to collect some blue time crystals to pause the boring ass video and walk away. The point is that routing a level to get S ranks opens up a whole new side of blinx I didn't even know about and made me appreciate the game even more. Even in weird kind of ways. Like, you know how I said fast forward messed up your aim and that kinda sucked on a casual playthrough, so it put people off from using it? Well, exactly because it messes up your aim, you can now pretty much only shoot enemies consistently when they are super right in front of you, which creates a ton of tension and risk to something that was really simple before. So yeah, once again, the most likely unintentional jank of blinx that makes the game way harder has somehow become something I love. You know, as much as I've mentioned about the high difficulty being a bit annoying or soul-crushing at times, it does give this game an elusive quality that eggs you on to master its mechanics. Like, the skill ceiling for execution, as well as the strategies and how you even route the levels, is incredibly high and super fascinating. I'd really recommend watching the speedrun done at the most recent AGDQ if you want to have your mind blasted into oblivion. God, there are so many little tricks and little time savers I learned from the speedrun, like how it made me so much more aware of how many places can be skipped by spitting out junk that you then jump on. In particular, this made the swinging guillotine levels so much less evil. So thank you speedrunners for making games better by just being good at them. The high skill ceiling and unique and fun jank to master has unexpectedly made this a game that I think has really stood the test of time, even if that exact stuff probably narrowed its appeal around the time of its original release. To kid me in 2002, blinx seemed like it was supposed to be Xbox's kid-friendly mascot platformer, but that ended up not being the right type of lane to place my expectations. Like, as a kid trying to play this casually, I was bound to hit a difficulty wall, like, not even that far into the game. However, now, looking back at this game over 20 years later, as someone who can actually grip one of those massive Xbox controllers with its stupid little black and white bean buttons, I can see the true appeal of blinx. This is Neon White meets Stray, obviously. Okay, really though, this is a tough-as-nails, arcadey action platformer with a focus on mastery of creative mechanics that plays and feels like nothing else. This game really swept me off my feet in the blinks of an eye. Okay, enough rata-rata, I gotta go pet my real cat, who is more of a floor sweeper than a time sweeper, but yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Bonus stage!
Blinx has one of the best fan sites I've seen in a long time. This thing has great UI, is super clean, and has like every single thing you could ever want to know about blinx on there, including the official 3D model of blinx in case you wanted to do this. One of the best things on here is the Welcome to the Blinx World DVD, which was a promotional DVD that gives some developer insight and has some behind the scenes footage of a weird ass blinx ad. Also, it's funny that they gave a voice and personality to the shopkeeper from blinx who doesn't talk in the game. And also they made these slightly horrifying 3D models to represent some of the devs. Yeah, this DVD is amazing. Hope we can get an official English translation someday because these auto-generated YouTube subtitles, well, they're trying. I really like that they cataloged all the merch that was ever made available for blinx, with the crowning jewel being this incredible blinx plush that's pretty rare. Personally, I really hope I can get myself a blinx watch someday because the fact that this merch item is a watch just fits the game perfectly. I also like the concept art they have here from blinx too. It looks like Ghibli concept art for some reason, but it's so dang good. Oh, and they've even cataloged all the blinx promotional events with pics and notes about the events. I love the page about the Tokyo Game Show because they had someone crouched down and hopping around in a Chronoblob suit that must have destroyed their knees. There's a lot of funny and weird stuff from these events, but the weirdest thing is that somehow they snuck in this pic of me and all the other blinx fans standing around waiting for blinx 3. Not sure how they found that. If you two are standing around in your blinx cosplay twiddling your thumbs, then why not put down the time sweeper and head over to your local xbox.com and buy the game or play it on Game Pass. It's cool that Microsoft has made the game pretty accessible, and it gives a sliver of hope for more blinx stuff in the future. But for now, I'll still just be here being way too obsessed with blinx.